we're going to look very briefly at the Catholic Church's response to the Protestant Reformation, and that's often called either the Counter-Reformation, or it's more commonly now called the Catholic Reformation. And it's this time period where the Catholic Church really does a lot of introspection. They try to figure out what they've done wrong and what they as an organization need to do in order to fix the problems that obviously exist in their church that has led to the separation of all of these various offshoots. And so this is the Catholic Reformation kind of in a nutshell. And so within the Catholic Reformation, we see at this time this emergence really of a new, and it's a new mysticism, but it's primarily driven by females. And mysticism is kind of identifying spirituality and worship and prayer, contemplative life, and kind of trying to remove yourself from the world through mystic and holy experiences. And so Teresa of Avila in Spain kind of leads the way. St. John of the Cross is involved in this as well. So this new mysticism is trying to rejuvenate. There's kind of this idea that the Catholic Church was in need of this kind of booster shot to get everything going again. And that is part of it. Old religious orders such as the Dominicans and the Franciscans and the Carmelites were kind of, or the Carmelites are a new one, sorry. But those old religious orders were there's this effort to rejuvenate them and bring them back in the fold and get their followers to actually practice what they had originally been intended for, and that is this kind of holy, pious life, or life of prayer and work. And in addition to these old religious orders, there's a creation of new religious orders, and the most famous one is called the Society of Jesus, or more commonly they're known as the Jesuits. And the Jesuits are a religious order founded by Ignatius of Loyola. And so basically when priests become priests, they can choose to become Jesuit priests. They can go through these schools and belong to the Jesuit orders and kind of follow these ideas. And Ignatius of Loyola writes a book called The Spiritual Exercises, which is building off this mysticism that has emerged. And it's all about kind of meditation and finding God through spiritual exercises that he encourages his followers to participate in every single day in order to have these mystical, religious, holy experiences. So the Jesuits are founded and they're recognized as a religious order in 1540, and their main vow is of absolute obedience to the Pope. And so that is their sole, they get all their directives from the Pope. He is their sole leader. They are not concerned with other political figures at the time, only the Pope. They swear an oath of absolute loyalty to the Pope. And that's going to come back in a few years to kind of be problematic for them. It'll get them into trouble with some of the kings at the time. But the Jesuits have three major objectives. First is educate. Educate the population, because they believe that education is crucial to combating Protestantism. So they want to increase education amongst the clergy and even among the laity, but mostly among the clergy. And the legacy of this Jesuit education is still seen in the United States today. Most private Catholic schools are Jesuits. So you have Loyola Marymount in Los Angeles, you have Loyola of Chicago, you have the University of Gonzaga, you have all these various Catholic schools. You have also Loyola in New Orleans. You have all these Catholic schools that were founded by Jesuit priests. So that idea of education as being important still carries on to this day. And it has roots in this Catholic Reformation. They also want to spread the Catholic faith among non-Catholics. So they're missionary priests. They want to go out and save souls. And so they are one of the first groups, they're not the first, but they're one of the first groups that come to the United States in order to set up missions and convert the United States, the New World, the Americas, to set up missions in order to convert the natives to Christianity, to Catholicism. And then their last thing is to fight Protestantism wherever they find it. They really want to have this unified, universal Catholicism. And so that is the Jesuits. Their three main goals are: one, to educate people; two, to convert non-Catholics to Catholicism; and three, to fight Protestantism wherever they find it. And so that's that. They also, there's this time during this Catholic Reformation where the Pope regains the power that they had lost. And if you'll recall, after the papacy being stuck at Avignon for a while and the split of three different popes, there was kind of this sense of weakness amongst the Pope. People weren't really respecting him. There was the conciliarist movement, which were calling for councils to help rule with the Pope, or even to replace the Pope as the head of the church. And so there is this time in the Counter-Reformation where the Pope regains his power. And Pope Paul III is one of the first popes that does this. He creates some reform commissions from 1530. They last for 2 years. His goal is to figure out, what can we do in order to help reform the church? He is the Pope who recognizes the Jesuits and takes on their, accepts their kind of obedience. And then he sets up the Roman Inquisition. And that is similar to the Spanish Inquisition that we saw earlier, where they would go around finding non-Catholics and forcing them to convert to Catholicism, or kicking them out, or, various other things like that. But they would find heretics and kill them if they would not recant their heresy. So the Roman Inquisition is kind of a brutal arm of the Catholic Church, but it is effective in keeping everybody in line. And so Pope Paul III is not afraid to use that in kind of a violent, pretty brutal way. Between Paul III and Paul IV, there's another pope who doesn't really do a whole lot, but Paul IV is important. During his time, he helps create what's known as the Index of Forbidden Books, and that is a list of books that the Catholic Church thinks is heretical, that should not be read by good practicing Catholics, and this index exists for a while and is part of this Roman Inquisition. So that is happening, at least in terms of power of the popes. I should also mention that these two organizations, this Inquisition creates this list of forbidden books, and they're under the purview of something called the Sacred Congregation of the Holy Office, and that is just an organization that the Pope creates, kind of a small council to make sure everyone keeps in line. So these two popes are really important in getting the power of the Pope back and reasserting his authority that had been questioned previously by kings and then by Luther and Henry VIII and Calvin and Zwingli and other reformers. And then the kind of most important part of this Catholic Reformation is what is known as the Council of Trent. And the Council of Trent is an ecumenical council. And an ecumenical council is a gathering of bishops and cardinals that meet together to talk about church matters. And for this, they meet in the city of Trent in northern Italy. It's an imperial city, so it's in the Holy Roman Empire. And the Council of Trent meets on and off from 1545 to 1563. And there's really a battle between moderates and conservatives over who will kind of win out in this council. And the conservatives really believe that the Catholic Church should change nothing, that it should keep on going the way it's going, and everyone who doesn't like them should just figure it out and convert back or get themselves killed. And moderates recognize that there is this need for some minor shifts. Again, nothing that the Council of Trent does is real radical. But the moderates are like, look, some of these criticisms are probably legit, and we should probably change them. And initially, this Council of Trent was set up, and they invited actually Lutherans and Calvinists to come participate so they could reach a consensus on religious dogma and religious teaching. This was designed initially to bring everyone back into the fold. The problem is that the Lutherans and the Calvinists refused to acknowledge that teaching or authority could come from sources other than the Bible, and the Catholics refused to budge on that as well. And so there really wasn't ever an opportunity for dialogue to happen, because those were both non-starters for both sides. So they're not allowed. And that's okay with the conservatives who just want to get rid of these Lutherans and Calvinists, while the moderates are kind of more looking to have these conversations. Nonetheless, the moderates kind of win out and recognize that there is some need for some reforms. Now, it is important to note that no no doctrine changes at this time. And you see down here that at the end of the Council of Trent, they really reaffirmed traditional Catholic teaching, that Scripture and tradition are important sources of authority and teaching, that faith and good works are the keys to salvation, not some sense of predestination or faith alone, and that there are, in fact, 7 sacraments that should be remembered. So they reaffirm a lot of these Catholic teachings. But there are some changes that they look to address some of the changes that had hurt the church before. So they limit simony, and simony is the selling of religious offices. So they put some restrictions on that. They also put restrictions on pluralism, so you can't hold multiple offices. And then they also do believe that the lack of education of the clergy was really hurting them, and so they decide that every parish priest should have a solid education, and so they push that through as well. And so that is those are some of the major changes of the Council of Trent. They also really believe that art kind of ran away from them during the Renaissance and was becoming too secular, too focused on other things, and they really encouraged artists to return to their roots and paint more religious iconography, really. So that's the Council of Trent. So when we're looking at the Catholic Reformation from kind of a larger viewpoint, we should recognize that it only happens because of the success of the Reformation. So the Catholic Church is totally unwilling to change until they see how much people want change. And when they see how much people want change, then they decide, well, maybe we have a few things that we should adjust within our own religion. And so that's happening on 2 levels. It's happening at the highest level with the Pope and the cardinals, but it's also happening with local parish priests, with the heads of certain monasteries. And so we see this real spiritual change, an increase in mysticism, religious orders like the Dominicans and the Franciscans getting back to their roots and really trying to do the work of God and do holy things and be kind and return to their roots. And we also then see, so that's kind of at the ground level. And then we see institutional change start to happen where the Council of Trent says, hey, we really need to increase the education of people, and let's kind of take in some of that really, really rampant purchasing of offices and what's perceived as corruption throughout the Catholic Church. So the Catholic Reformation is very reactive, and they do a few things, although at the end of the day, most people see this institution as being very slow to make any major changes.